Hello everybody, how's it going today? Glowplasma 231 here, back in today to talk about Weekly Shonen Jump, issue number 8 of 2025. As you can of course see here on my screen, we're talking about issue number 8 because that is the next column open that we are going to be talking about. And this is a very, very big deal for me as a reader of Weekly Shonen Jump and of manga in general, because I can officially say, as of recording this video, I am 110% caught up on Weekly Shonen Jump, which is honestly a really big deal for me because it's been all the way since I think, let me actually just go here to my other spreadsheet. It's been here since issue number 44, where I was last caught up on Shonen Jump. It has been legitimately that, or no, it was actually issue 43, and I've not been caught up since issue 40. I read issue 43 on the day of release, and I've not been caught up on Weekly Shonen Jump for, what is that? Almost 20 issues, like, consecutively. Like, not 20, it's more like 15 around there, because if we just take a look, I've pretty much been doing that since Ichi to Witch started. I haven't been caught up, so however many chapters Ichi to Witch is about is how many I haven't been caught up. But either way, I am finally caught up on Manga Day, which is a really big deal because, number one, next week, as we have been confirmed at this point, is the end of Undead Unluck. And if we come all the way back here to Weekly Shonen Jump of 2021, we can see that Undead Unluck was one of the series that I was reading whenever I first started ranking all of these series in a magazine, which is really crazy to think that, like, okay, Dr. Stone ended, what, in the beginning of 2023, if I'm not mistaken? Or was it 2022 whenever that ended? Yeah, Dr. Stone ended in 2022. That's crazy to think. And of course, we've had a few of those extra bonus chapters. Mashal ended in 2023 also, which is also just crazy to think about. My Hero just ended last year in 2024. Black Clover is still running, but, like, it's not part of the spreadsheet anymore. It's that weird, really weird situation. Undead Unluck is ending next week. And then the Elusive Samurai and Blue Box are going to be the last two series that are going to be I've been reading since the beginning. Granted, I also sort of count Witch Watch in that because I read Witch Watch, but then I wasn't really getting into it that much, so I took a break on it. And whenever I finally caught back up here about 17 chapters in, I was like, okay, this series is great. And I've been reading it every single week since then, but I sort of count it because, like, hey, look at this. It was within the first month of when I started recording chapters, so Witch Watch is all things considered. But like I said, it's just a big deal. And honestly, I'm really happy because this was a really fun week of manga to read. I think there's a lot of good things going on to it. And again, I'm going to try to keep this video around that 30-minute mark. I guess you're going to see whenever I get done and post this video how long it is. So I could be wrong there. I could be correct. But either way, I just want to sit down and, yeah, talk about this week of Weekly Shonen Jump. And I guess let's just go and hop into it. Like I said, Undead Unluck, the penultimate chapter of this crazy series. And honestly, I just really like this chapter for all of the characters that we get to see do all of their things. I guess I never opened up any of these chapters, which is a little bit of a bummer, which means I'm gonna have to go and, okay, no, I opened them all up but Undead Unluck, my bad there. But, like, this whole thing of, like, where we open up the chapter and we're like, okay, apparently the other thing that Luna said is we get to make up one more rule for the universe that gets added onto the, like, whole pendulum stone, or not even a pendulum stone, just like the stone of, like, hey, this is how many quests you have till Ragnarok. And Nico has this whole idea of, okay, like, what if we just add a revolution? It's a really good idea, and it's like, hey, that way everybody can experience seasons when Gina already killed Autumn in this loop. It's a little bit of a really fun idea, and, like, all of the negators just bouncing off each other, like Billy, Rip, Gina, Sean, Chikara, like, all of these characters who I do care about. I do wish there was a little bit more of Shin in this chapter, because we just don't see him really whatsoever. Like, him and Mui are just sort of, like, on their own, and I really feel like they were my favorite characters in this series, besides for Chikara as members of the Union. Of course, they were the characters who were really featured very early on in, like, the first few arcs. I mean, Chikara was, like, one of the first major characters you got, and then Shin was a little bit before that, but then during the summer arc is where Shin and Mui's story sort of, like, expanded out. So I really wish that Shin and Mui got to do a little bit more. Like, also in this chapter, like, Tatiana does absolutely nothing, and she was one of the biggest parts of that first loop, along during the whole Chikara arc, whenever all of that was sort of going on. And I told them of, like, okay, now the Union is officially disbanded, we're all going to be going on our own and doing this thing. And then, of course, this whole time, like, Fuko has no memories of any of this. She doesn't know what's going on. And he's like, okay, well, I think we can figure out how to do this. And she takes him to the bridge where they first met, where Soul is just standing there. At first I thought, was like, okay, are we going to get a reveal that like Soul was actually a negator this entire time, and he had like an unsoul ability, or like we always knew that like he had the ability of soul, but like was there like an antithesis to where a Yume was actually also a negator at the same time? No, it just seems like he's a Yume who did not get taken up as a sort of part of this world, and also with, I guess, Luna wanting to be fair to Fuko, giving Fuko her memories back through the process of souls with the character Soul. I don't know. It's a little bit of like an, okay, I don't really understand, but at the end of the day, I enjoyed most of this. And then, like, Soul goes to see where Ruin is, and, like, as they're walking away after talking about all this, he snaps his fingers, and oh, look at that. Fuko has all of her memories back. Now, this sort of reminds me a little bit of the end of The Promised Neverland. Now, I have never read the end of The Promised Neverland. I've listened to a manga podcast which covered it back in the day whenever it was doing its sort of various thing. And from what I remember hearing about it, like I said, I've only watched the first season of the anime because that's what I've heard is the only good part of that series, and I very much enjoyed that. Very, very good offset there, right? But the whole idea of like, okay, I think Emma was the main character's name. She lost all of her memories of her family, and the whole thing was that she had no way to get them back, and that's sort of the whole thing that was going on there. Well, here in Undead Unluck, Andy has this whole idea of like, okay, if Soul's still alive, he sort of snaps his fingers, and now Fuko's memories are back. It's a fine enough conclusion, and I will be very happy to see what happens next time. Hopefully we get like a 25-page chapter or something, like just like, hey, here's the send-off to Undead Unluck. I guess a very fair way to do that would be looking at how Mission Yozakura family did it, but also I'm not sure if that got like the page extension for the final chapter or not either. And I'm not going to particularly spoil myself on that series because I plan to read that series at some point here, but yeah. Undead Unluck, very good chapter. We will probably put it mid-high tier. I think it was a fun chapter, but I don't think it was like everything amazing. One Piece is another one of those conflicting chapters that I thought had a lot of really good and interesting stuff in it, of like all of the giants just having their big party, having fun, and this whole discussion of, okay, who is actually this sun god Nika, and what is their role, and all of the giants getting very upset about that. I forget what the chief of the giants, I think his name is what, Hyrule, if I'm not mistaken. Let me sort of just like scan through the chapter here real quick. Either way, what I'm mainly getting to is the book that he calls the Harley, which seems to be like the giant Bible almost, and how Sun God Nika, or how the world has been destroyed twice already, and how every time Sun God Nika appears, it seems to be something entirely different about shaping the world around us. I very much like seeing this, and then we have this whole idea of, alright, who is Loki actually? Is he really this big devilish guy? And I think his name's, Chief Hyrule. Gerd says it here as part of this chapter, like, hey, you don't have to rationalize his actions, right? Which it seems like Hyrule is definitely going to do, maybe saying like, hey, Loki may not be the best guy ever, but he definitely seems like he's not the devil that they make him out to be, like a very misguided child, if anything. Right, and then we have this sort of notion going around here of, okay then, what's going on here? And like Zoro and Luffy go to talk about who this guy really is, and like, okay, we need to go get a key to sort of break him out. And then Nami joins on, and then we have this whole thing where Roto also says like, hey, I'll help you guys out. I'm not the biggest fan of that, because like there's the whole joke of like, oh man, Nami's got like Roto right under her thumb, and like, oh, look at this, and Roto's like, oh man, Gerd, step on me. Like it's I'm not particularly the biggest fan of this writing style, but hey, I am very excited to see just the original 3 Straw Hats, Luffy, Zoro, and Nami, go out and go in and break out this key to presumably go help Loki in some sort of sense. It seems really interesting, and like this whole moral code of like Zoro saying, hey, I am going to be the one to make this decision if we let this guy go or not. You're not going to be doing it without me, Luffy. I find it a little bit interesting. And then we get introduced to the Holy Knight Gunko, and this person who looks exactly like Shanks, who we don't know if it's Shanks, but this Shanks lookalike, and then this Holy Knight Gunko who has like this devil fruit ability of like arrows and like some paper of some sorts. It looks very, very interesting, and it's just, this One Piece chapter introduced a lot of things, and I'll be interested to see where it goes next time, mainly in the whole respect to, okay, how is Luffy, Zoro, and Nami going to be going through the Giant's Castle, or sort of do this like almost prison break in a way, like do this very pirate eccentric thing. I don't know. Very, very good chapter, and definitely One Piece was definitely high up this week too. Kagurabachi was just a really fun chapter this week. Of course, I'll be doing a longer, about 20 to 30 minute video on this chapter of Kagurabachi, just going through, breaking through it. But this was a very fun chapter about Chihiro really realizing he's weak, and then this whole moment where he's like, okay, I need to become the samurai that these people expect me to be, which is also a very fun play on words that, as we get to, he ends up using the Ei White Purity style, which is, of course, Samura's technique, and he is becoming that samurai in the same way that Samura is a samurai. I find that to be, like, a really cool, like, diversion of expectations here. And then just going through, like, okay, Kugiri is fighting. He is supposed to be actually going after, of course, Iori, but because he's more of like, oh no, I just want to fight, have a fun sword time, he's like, okay, Cheer, I'm going to end up clashing blades with you. Just really fun chapter of Kagurabachi, and I don't think it was the best chapter this week, but I also thought it was a lot of fun. A very conflicting chapter I get into is actually Kill Blue, because on one hand, I really like how this chapter starts off as, number one, I just want to come through and I just want to give Kakeru Inukai a hug. I just love how this guy is just, like, so pure and like, hey, master, and master's master, if you two are going somewhere, I want to go too, and, like, whole thing of, like, hey, then I'll call you Master O. Like, I just love how Kakeru is being portrayed as, like, this really naive child who's had to go through all of these very tough times and is just rationalizing with his life. I really like how it sort of, like, built up in this way. And then, of course, Master, and I don't actually know what his name is since Ogami always just calls him Master, but Ogami and Master go off to a bookstore, and Ogami has this moment where he's like, man, I just love the bookstore. Like, it's got my heart all flutter. Like, hey, there's just something about paper. Like, hey, phones and, like, reading stuff online is cool, but, like, there's just something about the paper in front of you that makes you just really, really love the art of reading, which is a reason that I love collecting physical manga, is because, like, hey, if there's ever a time where I just need to sit down and do something and not be in front of a screen, not be distracted by some sort of, like, text or any social media, whatever it is, like, hey, I can just go on my shelf, pull off my volume of, like, Kagurabachi Volume 1, any of, like, the Fable volumes I've been loving to read recently, any, like, random My Hero volume, just sit down and just read it and have a good time just with the paper in front of me and just reading through it. Like, it's just that thing. And then the chapter gets into this other aspect of, oh no, Master sees his sister, Kapo, on a date with Tenma pretty much, and is very much like, oh my gosh, this is crazy, I can't handle all of this. And there's a lot of funny jokes, because I do love Tenma Tendo as a character. Just going through and just seeing how he interacts with Kapo is very, very fun. And eventually Kapo just comes over and grabs these two, and then Master and Tenma sort of have this catch match back and forth, where Ogami sort of has this very human moment where he's like, hey, so Kapo, what exactly does Tenma mean to you? And she just says, like, hey, I'm not going to tell you that, but hey, in the same respect, what does Norin mean to you, Ogami? And Ogami's just like, oh gosh, what is this, right? And also Kapo in this moment has, like, this whole thing of, like, hey, a young lady's heart isn't so straightforward. And I really like Ogami from his perspective as, like, the old man that he truly is. Like, hey, sure, okay, I've lived for almost 40 years and I still haven't figured that out myself. And I gotta be honest, at this point, it's probably never gonna happen. And seeing this human side of Ogami is just something that I really do like to see, right? And they have this whole little joke about it, and eventually Ogami just starts to go and play with Tenma and Master if this catch game, and Kapo sort of left in the corner like, hey, what's going on, Ogami? I was having, like, a serious conversation with you. I really did like this chapter end of the day. I don't think it was the best chapter out there, but I definitely thought it was a high up one, just because it wasn't the worst chapter, but I also felt like there was a lot out of it. Like, yeah, I can understand how this happens, and, like, the whole idea of, like, okay, we've got this Syscon character in Master. It's not the best thing ever, and I'm not necessarily a fan of those characters unless it's somebody like Lance from Astral Magic and Muscles, who sort of portrays themselves in this certain way. But overall, I thought it was a really fun chapter and one that I did enjoy. Now, if we're talking about gas chapters that really focus on one thing, Ichi to Witch was a very good example of this, with just Descross going after and fighting the world hater magic, just going back and forth, just showing you what I'm made of, I'll show you what, if you show me what you're made of, I'll show you what I'm made of, pretty much just slugging it back and forth. She, like, saves Ichi from, like, having the whole decomposed things happening, and really the most interesting thing here is at some point throughout this chapter, she's like, hey, I actually have lost count of how many magics I've acquired. And I saw Axel Blaze Productions on Twitter, who's a really good YouTube channel. You should go check them out for sure. There's a lot of really great content. I saw a post from them actually before I read this chapter, where we see that she, Deskross, has 25 of these magic stones around her. And whenever you go back to chapter 2, whenever she said like the highest amount of magics that's been acquired is like 602 or 614, it really shows that Deskross has almost collected like either, I forget what the math was, if it's like 1/16 or one whatever. I'll put the tweet up on screen so you guys actually know how like bad I am at remembering all of this stuff. Because like, hey, I've lost count, and all of the magics that we see that she just uses, she uses like one that she specifically calls like, hey, shoot him down, Iskandar. She uses this Iskandar, and she also uses a Alexandria magic, also is like some gravity magic of some type. It just seems she uses a lot of these abilities, and she also uses this thing that she calls Golconda, which is like this weird magic that like makes anybody who is part of it just speak their words out loud, like the magic, and the world hater's like, hey, my child, but then he like fends it off. It's just a really cool scene. I'm gonna be interested to see, because she's like, hey, I'm sorry, I collected all these magics, or some of them your friends, like, whoopsie, I'm sorry. As we see that Ichi is slowly healing, which is apparently another magic that she has. And I'm more interested, like, is this a magic to rewind time? We don't really know, which is something that I really love about the intrigue of this series. But I'm also interested to see how this conflict ends, because of course, we know the world hater is not going to be taken out here. That's going to be Ichi's job much later on, maybe in like a combo match with Deskross, we don't really know. But just seeing how this conflict ends, and how the world hater gets away, and how we progress to something more straightforward in this story, right? But Ichi to which, very, very good though. Sidcraft Love is a Mystery is a little bit of an interesting one. It really gets into like these massive rom-com aspects where like Elio is captured by this lady who's the other bomber on the Elfie ship, and she's like, oh no, if Master Sid would die, I wouldn't be able to do that, like think about your own loved ones. And then she goes to jump off the side of the boat, like killing herself, and Elio's like, no, I'll help you, and she like grabs onto her legs. And then Sidcraft and also Lulu is here for some reason, comes and like grabs the other leg to pull the Elio up in this other character, and it's like, okay, whatever's going on here, it's fine. And then like the end of the chapter is this whole thing of like, okay, oh hey, we're all getting ready to get off the island, or get off this boat. Oh wait, where's Souffle Flanberry? And it's like, oh my gosh, she's still helping people out on the ship. Well no, Sid can't do that, so there's gonna be more rom-com stuff between two of them that happens next chapter whenever Sidcraft goes to save Souffle. I don't know. It got a few laughs out of me. It was a funny enough rom-com chapter, but Sidcraft has this problem where it delves too deeply into all of these things of like all of these tropes of, hey, romantic comedy stuff, where I'm not the biggest fan of it at the end of the day. And we're also going to quickly skip Astro Royale to go talk about the other side of that coin, which is Himatin, which is another rom-com series, but that has a whole lot more heart to me in this sense. Like, yes, it's rom-com, but it sort of attaches on that more emotional moment of, hey, these characters are just people at the end of the day. They're vulnerable in their own ways. So that's how it is. And that's what the Himatin aspect is. Of course, in this chapter we go through, and it is a Kanna chapter, first and foremost, or however you say that sentence, where pretty much Kanna's just going through her house and like, oh no, there's a cockroach, and she goes to school and just says like, hey, Iemori, can you help me out of it? And Iemori's like, sure. And I really love the objection that we get here to where Iemori's like, oh, yeah, cleaning a house is my duty. I hate cockroaches also. And Kanna's like, oh no, like, I'll help you do all of this. And eventually Iemori, like, takes it off as, like, they have a little bit of a fun romantic comedy stuff back between the two of them. And I thought this chapter was going to be ending with just this cockroach stuff and maybe, like, him going to do it over at Himari's house or something like that. But no, it actually is just a Kanna chapter where she's like, hey, thank you for doing this for me, Iemori. And like, as Iemori is having all of these doubts of like, hey, should I really be going over to this model's house and doing all of these things? Kanna just like changes into this maid outfit, which is like, okay, it's fan service, it is what it is. But she's like, hey, let me serve you. And of course, because we know that she really loves her maid and butler manga, it's just a nice little thing where Kanna's like, hey, let me just serve you this time. And she ends up making this food, and there's really another really funny moment that I like, where Iemori is hearing Kanna cook all of this food, and he just hears like the crunch, crunch, crunch of the knife go down. She's like, oh no, she's abusing that knife in there, oh no, which is a very Iemori thing to not only think, but also do, right? I do like that, and eventually Shin comes out with a thing of omelet rice coming up, and she calls it like the Kanna Cafe omelet rice, which is also just like a really cute thing. And she just serves it to Iemori, and Iemori is like, oh wow, this is actually really, really good, right? And Kanna has this whole thing of like, hey, no, like, I wanted to help you do this, like, hey, I'm not doing this as the up-and-coming talent Kanna Aizawa, I'm doing this as a personal thank you from me, Iemori. It's just like a really, really nice thing. And then, of course, we have to have the end of chapter gag where, oh no, Kanna didn't put up all of her undergarments from earlier, and Iemori falls back into them. Oh no, 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 yada, yada, yada. But overall, I just feel like the emotional connection in this chapter of Hima 10 was much better than anything that Sid Craft gave us this week. And one reason I really like Hima 10 a lot more as a series than Sid Craft right now is because we're able to have these more deeply connected emotional moments, where Sid Craft is very much more like, okay, here's our comedy aspects, which is honestly something I'm not quite expecting out of the series that much, because if we remember, what is it, Taishi Tsu? Yeah, I'm not mistaken, that's who writes Sid's Craft. His last work that I read was We Never Learn, which, yes, while it was this whole romantic comedy thing, we had a lot of things like Fumino with her dad, where it was a lot of this thing of like, hey, coming together and overcoming this emotional burden with each other, and coming to a deeper understanding, which is something that we haven't gotten in Sid Craft so far, but hopefully something that we'll get eventually if this series wants really any chance to survive in the magazine. Going back up to Astro Royale, of course, we skipped to talk about the rom-coms there for a second. This is a chapter pretty much with Hibaru overcoming all of these things to fight the Black Flame, if I'm not mistaken, is what this guy was called, or the or the Fireball, that's what this guy's called. Hachiku Nekosogi, who's the brother of the guy who kidnapped Hiro Yutsuru, or whatever the hell I don't give a shit about this series, so his brother, and this whole thing about Hibaru overcoming this, like, fighting through all of this black smoke in this moment of his Astro, and taking the hit to eventually come through and like, hey, you're thinking too small, I'm fine to rebuild this country from chaos, and then punching out this guy like, hey, a king won't fall to a soldier's fists. And then everybody's like, oh my gosh, look at this. It's the Yotsurugi bullet, pretty much. And it's like, hey, we're going to have to stand up on another level. And this guy's like, hey, look at this. Looks like I gotta go full force from the very first match. I will say I'm happy that this match isn't over in the first chapter, because that's the problem I have with Astro Royale, is this pacing seems really, really off. I mean, literally, I think like 2 chapters ago, if not, I will say it's probably more like 3, we were dealing with this whole idea of, oh my gosh, this is crazy, like, we're fighting Himuro and all of the ice things, like this crazy thing, now we gotta go find all of the Dragon Balls, I mean, I'm sorry, not Dragon Balls, I'm sorry, we're talking about the Daybreak Ores in this scenario, and now we're just finally in a tournament arc, and like, the way that this series has jumped around in pace, I'm not the biggest fan of, but, hey, Astro Royale, it may or may not be the worst chapter of the week, I don't know what I'm gonna be saying about that. Ultimate XS Kyoshi is a really chapter where we just got introduced into this new leader of the Kyoka Kurogane, who is the leader of the Sanguis, one of the other exorcist branches out there. And we get this whole idea where Kyoshi sort of has to like show her what he's made of, and like does all this whenever she comes into the restaurant. I also want to say I really love not only the chapter title of this chapter, which is The Prince on a White Horse at the Gates of Hell, but also the color page where we see the Kyoshi is snowboarding, which is a really fun image that I would love to use for the thumbnail, but it's not very good thumbnail material at the end of the day, being it's not like, hey, here's what's actually happened in this chapter. But we just pretty much just get introduced to her and some whole, like, aspects where she's like, oh, man, I want a white knight to, like, take me out of here. And the whole thing of, like, Nihon, Jack, Joe, and Diego being like, hey, when you're 10, you can set all of the rules for whatever guys you want to date, right? It is whatever. And then the final page of this chapter is mainly like, no, Sasaki, you're not going to die in this upcoming conflict, whenever he's talking with this, like, shaman guy he goes to. And the shaman's like, hey, now Sasaki, listen with an open mind in this upcoming battle. And Sasaki's like, hey, sorry, if it's bad news, I don't want to hear it, but I'm a gambler, that's just how I roll. And this seer just is like, hey, well, I see, that's why I like you, then I'll just go and be quiet and pray for your good fortune, Sasaki. Which really leads us to believe in the Black Parade. Sasaki is going to bite the dust, which will probably fuel up Kiyoshi out of rage to end up beating Asura Roth before coming to terms like, hey, I've got to mellow myself back out and not be enraged to fight this battle. Which, of course, is just like good manga writing in general, so I'll be happy to see where Ultimate Exodus Kyoshi goes in the future. Definitely a lot of fun for sure. So we'll just go ahead and put Ultimate Exodus Kyoshi, middle of the pack for now in this initial stage of just seeing where we are. Definitely works. Akane Banashi was a really fun chapter, mainly focusing on, what is his name again? Let me just go find it. It said in the very beginning of this chapter, Kashio, who is the writer for the monthly Rakugo news magazine thing, pretty much. And he's writing his whole thing of like, oh my gosh, here's how the life has gone on in the past 3 years. Like, hey, we've had great people like Karashi and Hikaru Arakawa sort of step up and become these great people in Futatsume, and also these other Shinuchi who are around. But hey, one wonders if only Akane Arakawa were here now. She canceled her Futatsume debut and vanished from the stage for 3 whole years. It's this whole idea where apparently we see that Kashio is going around with this guy named Yoshiharu Niki, who is a monthly Rakugo new vice editor-in-chief. He's now working for the magazine. He was formerly a travel magazine guy, as we will get into in this chapter. And he's taking him around Paris, just having a good time, seeing all of this stuff go on. And Kashio is just walking around until he just sees this sign in Paris of, hey, Art Traditional Japan Spectacle de Rakugo, Akane Arakawa. And he sees this neon sign. He's like, wait a second. And he runs inside this French guy and says like, hey, let me in. He's like, ticket please, like, show me s'il vous plaît. And he's like saying all of this stuff. Also, I don't know French, so I'm sure I butchered the hell out of that. And honestly, I'm proud to. It's my great job as an American to make sure I butcher all other languages, including Japanese. Like, I think I said some Japanese words wrong earlier, like the whole thing where Descross uses her ability of Iskandar and all of these other things. Like, I'm sure I said some of that wrong, even though I don't think Iskandar is a Japanese phrase per se. You know what? We're just going to move on and continue talking about Akane Banashi. But Kashio does all of this, and he goes inside, and the guy's like, well, the show is almost over, and then he eventually lets him in, as eventually we just see, like, Kashio's like, hey, I searched around everywhere, and I could not find where Akane went after these 3 years. And he just sees her performing live in Paris, and all of these people just having a good time watching Akane's show as she's doing this, as she just does a Rakugo story. And Kashio's like, damn, the Rakugoka Akane Arakawa charted a new path in the city of art. It's just a really cool moment. It just really got me hyped to be like, oh man, this was just like pure fire. Akane Banashi, you are just always good. Another great chapter was Blue Box for this fact of, yes, we are currently in the match between not only Saisho, but also Emily, which is also the match between, why can I not remember her, Yumeka and Chinatsu in this moment, right? And we get this whole idea as we get throughout the chapter of Chinatsu just coming through and coming to terms with her life. We even see that, like, Yumeka is being benched because she's using almost 2 of her energy. And we also just see, like, how Haru is looking at all of this in the moment. And also we just pretty much see that Taiki has brought Chinatsu's dad down, and we see all of the people who are rooting for Chinatsu here are, of course, Karin, being with Karin Ayame, and also for some reason Kyo is here, and he's also sitting next to Ayame, which has to be very, very awkward for him, being like, as far as we know, he still has a pretty big crush on Ayame, so sort of is what it is there. But this whole idea where they're all cheering for Chinatsu, and Chinatsu for the last half of this chapter has this really nice moment. And I was sitting in my college dorm floor's lounge while reading these chapters, and I just spoke this part out loud to me because it's just like such a nice, incredible moment. She's like, hey, before I knew it, it became second nature to hold this basketball in my hands. We see her mother just going like, hey, Chinatsu, why don't you try, like, letting go of the ball and dropping it on the ground? Like, she just, like, huddles onto it, and her mom's like, hey, Chinatsu, this thing isn't like a dinosaur egg. And, like, Chinatsu sees basketball players on the screen. She's like, hey, I want to do that, and like, hey, I want to be like Yumeka, who she envisions as this massive force in her mind. And she just thinks like, hey, even this ball, which at first was very hard to hold and would often slip out of my hands, like, hey, this ball would eventually stick to my hand. And she remembers just her childhood with Yumeka, and she just thinks like, hey, back then I was afraid that Yumeka would say something negative about basketball. And back then, if I just talked to her about it, maybe I could have played with Yumeka under different circumstances. But then, I'm sure I'd still just be following her. But this is what I like, as we just see that she's going through playing basketball, and we see whenever she was in the gymnasium earlier after her big match, wherever she lost and she sprained her ankle, where she was crying and she was missing the baskets as she was getting them into the rim. And she just thinks like, hey, I will let my present self reap the rewards of all of the hard work that I've put in. As we see this panel of Chinatsu running up, one of the Saisho competitors also running up, trying to block her, and Chinatsu just jumping up and getting the basketball right in the basket, closing the massive lead between Yumeka and herself, and also their teams in this moment. Oh, such a good chapter, so much of this emotional depth that we understand with this character here. Blue Box was so good this week. Elusive Samurai was very much of a history chapter. We see that Toki has died in this chapter. Okay, I was not expecting that. We also see Toki without his whole, like, garb on, as Tadayoshi, who is Takoyuji's little brother, just comes through and, like, says, Toki, we are going to kill you, and then proceeds to kill Toki. We also get this whole idea, like, there's this new split in the whole school of whatever it's called, in the Ashikaga Shogun. I don't know why I was also calling it a school. And then the whole idea is, okay, and Tokoyuki is around. He's gotten a clothing upgrade from Mima, and oh no, Tokoyuki's almost marrying age, so who's he going to marry? Mima, who he promised? Or oh no, maybe Ayako or Shizuku? Who really knows? That's really all there was to the Elusive Samurai. It was a fine chapter, but like not the worst, not the best either. And then Witch Watch was just a comedy chapter all about Nico using the Embiggen spell on Momochi, and Momochi just becoming a very big person in the Otagi house, and Morito having to go and take care of her. Really simple chapter there. I know I spent a lot of time talking about like some of these chapters like Akane Banashi and Blue Box, and in no time on the Elusive Samurai and Witch Watch. But really, comparatively, there's not much I want to say about those chapters besides, like, hey, comedy chapter and, hey, history chapter of the series. And that's really all there is there. But with that, let's sit down and let's get all of these chapters ranked here real quick. Definitely the best chapter of the week is Blue Box. That emotional moment, like I spoke on, is just so deep and so very much good. Building up from the bottom, I think I actually have it laid out very well. So we're going to have Astro Royale, which I felt was the weakest chapter of the week, followed up by, I think, Sid Craft. Just as I said, I had a few issues with it there. Probably throwing the ELU Elusive Samurai up next. To be fair, yeah, I think Witch Watch is a good next chapter. Was it good? Did I enjoy it? Yes, but also like there were better things out there this week. Honestly, I feel like I did this very well in the beginning. We'll just put Kill Blue here. Like I said, I enjoyed parts of that chapter, but it wasn't the best either. Going up from the top again, after Blue Box, I think Akane Banashi was just so good. The whole thing of, like, Kashio just coming through, like, oh my gosh, she's in Paris. Like, it is a really fun moment. Honestly, next, we'll put One Piece, Piece, followed by Kagura Bachi, and then we will throw in an Undead Unlock. Then we have these other few. I really liked Hematin this week. I'm gonna be real, I really just love the dynamic between both Kanna and Iemori. Thought it was fun. Then we'll throw Ichi the Witch, if I could spell the right. Oh, that's not how you spell the at all. And then we'll put a ulti, if I could spell ulti X-Row. Jesus, I cannot spell. Kiyoshi. Okay, I think those are some pretty good rankings. As for a character this week, who do I necessarily want to pick? Chinatsu is a very good choice. Chinatsu. I don't really feel like I'm giving it to Kashio. One Piece, I thought Zoro was really funny. Kagurabachi, Chihiro had a very good moment. Chihiro, he had a very cool moment. Unlock, I don't really feel like there's anybody in there. Himatin, Kanna is always a good option. Ichidowich. Honestly, I probably should give it to Karas. How do I even spell Karas? I legitimately have no idea. Yeah, okay, it's Dess. So Dess. I've never had to spell Descaras before. Karas. So Descaras. That's how I spelled Descaras. Kyoshi, I don't think like this new character of Kyoka really deserves it. Yeah, honestly, let's just give it to Descaras. So Descaras from Ishi the Witch. I feel like that's a pretty good little ranking right there. And yeah, thank you guys so very much for watching this video on Weekly Shonen Jump, issue number 8 of 2025. Again, I am finally caught up. Granted, this video will be coming out after the fact, after these chapters have already been out for a little while, but hey, it is what it is. But thank you guys so very much for watching. I've covered plenty of other Weekly Shonen Jump issues on this channel, so if you want to go check out those, there's not only going to be a end card in the end portion of this video, in like the final 15 seconds of me rambling here, but also check out the description and just go to my YouTube channel where I do plenty of other anime and manga related content. You can just go check out all of that stuff right there. And yeah, I really don't have anything else to say. It's a really fun week of manga. I felt like really everything had a very good showing this week. Maybe besides like Sid Craft and Astro Royale, but I really did like the rest of the week of manga. And I'm sure in the manga I don't read, there's also some pretty cool stuff. So with that, I will see you guys next time with issue number 9 of 2025, where not only will we see the end of Undead Unluck, but also maybe the beginning of a new series. I forget if we're getting new chapters next week or if they're starting in issue number 10. I honestly forget, but being the Yozakura family ended last week and there's currently a vacancy in the magazine, startup one next week, Undead Unluck also ends, so start up the next one after that, because I know we are getting 2 new series in like, I think one's like Flame or something, or like Embers, maybe. I think that's what it was called, which is like a football manga or a soccer, not American football manga, as I tend to think of it. But yeah, with all of that, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll catch you guys next time with, again, issue number 9 of 2025. This has been issue number 8 of 2025, and I'll catch you guys next time. Thank you guys so much for watching. This will be Glowplasma 231, signing out.